Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another awesome episode of Parenting is Easy, said no one ever. I am your host, Chananya Abraham, and I am so excited to share an awesome conversation I had today with a amazing reading specialist, Dr. Emily, who is going to talk to us about ADHD, dyslexia, what our role is as parents, how we could communicate better with the school, and most importantly, how we can be there in the corner with our kids. This is such an amazing conversation. I went way off script, to be honest, because there were so many personal questions dealing with my own issues at home with some of my kids that I felt were important that I wanted to get out. And hopefully we have a chance to have a follow-up one day because I feel like there's so many more places that we can go. Talking about the concept of having healthy reading is such an important one. And even if your kid is not going to be a reader, but the concept of reading is really important for all of us. Emily's going to talk to us about how we can do a better job at that. I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I record having the awesome conversation with her. As always, if you want to hear more on topics when it comes to parenting, please like and subscribe below. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, or if you would like to be a guest possibly, or maybe even share some other possibilities of guests going forward, please email us at parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. Okay, so I think there are so many areas when it comes to reading, Emily, that I really want to get to. But I really, as someone that has two kids that have been diagnosed with ADHD, and
Mm.
I think there are so many superpowers that come together with that. And I'm curious specifically, let's go right into it regarding parents and the role of parents and knowing what their kids have. How can we really help our kids succeed in a situation where it may look like they have a deficiency, but really it's something a lot more and a lot better, and maybe even a lot more awesome than that?
Sure. Well, first off, I would absolutely agree. There are so many superpowers that are associated with ADHD, with dyslexia, learning disabilities. And I often find you probably do also that many individuals who have ADHD struggle through school, but once they get past school, they can thrive in life. So, teaching them the right tools and the right strategies to help them get through school is really key for them. With that said, I'm a big believer that parents will always be their child's best advocate. No one knows their own child the way a parent does. So if a parent is noticing that something doesn't seem right, their child can't get through their homework, they can't stay focused, they're not doing well in school, the first thing they should do is speak to their child's teacher. Is the teacher noticing any kinds of challenges? Could something deeper maybe be going on? If so, the next step would be to request an evaluation and really go through that process to dig a little bit deeper to see if, in fact, something deeper is going on.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and I think when it comes to our kids, well, maybe we should even back up a little bit and talk a little bit about, okay, at what age is the right time to actually get a kid assessed for an ADHD diagnosis, and is there something called being going for a diagnosis at too young of an age?
Well, I think it's somewhat of a controversial topic. I don't do evaluations for ADHD myself. I'm not a neuropsychologist. Some will evaluate as young as age 5 or 6, and then others feel that's still a little bit too young because kids are still developing. The brain still has neuroplasticity and is evolving. So I would say somewhere in the range of 5 to 7, depending on who you ask and depending on their opinion.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then bringing it back to what we're saying regarding parents and the role, is there a certain mindset that you try to talk to parents about regarding what their role as parents are? In my office, and the way I talk about it in general is, parents are not teachers, and it's a separate role. And parents should not play teachers because then you're mixing the roles, and it's more important to be a parent than it is to be a teacher at home. So, how do we go about making sure that we have the right mindset as parents and that we're dealing with it from what our role is? And what's the mindset that parents that we should be having?
Sure. And I completely agree with you. I think when parents try to take the role of a teacher or a therapist or another provider, they often butt heads with their child and they don't get along and it affects their relationship in a negative way. And I do hear that all the time. So I think it's really the role of the parent to find the right support that's not them to help their child, whether that's support at school, whether it's a therapist, a tutor, a speech provider, whatever it may be. I think it's really the parents' role to almost be the CEO and really manage and oversee everything that their child is receiving and make sure that they're constantly on top of any changes that need to be made within that realm, but that they're really managing that appropriately.
Okay, so then how, as we as parents, when we see our kids struggling, how can we support them, but also knowing that there is a, let's call it a learning handicap when it comes to how they go about things. And what do you tell parents when it comes to making sure that their kids are getting the attention and the help that they need, but yet we're still staying in our role as parents?
Sure. Sometimes it's tricky, and I think sometimes can parents can become frustrated and they don't always understand what's going on. But I always try to tell parents to take that positive spin as much as possible, encourage their child to, of course, get through their homework and do what they can, but really try to emphasize the positives, show them any growth that they're noticing, empower them, really try to take that positive spin because I think it's very easy to go negative and become easily frustrated, but having that positive attitude, that positive spin can really help build their child's self-confidence.
For sure, and I'm so glad you said that. And I've heard a rule recently. I think it comes from the marital therapy world, where if there's going to be a negative, there has to be at least four positives in that communication. And I think when it comes to our kids, should probably be even more than that. So if we're going to have a role of needing to tell our kids to critique them in some way, make sure there's at least four amounts of positives, probably even more than that. I don't know if there are any specific studies out there. I know I haven't read any yet that talk about this, but I think there has to be a balance where it's four times the amount of the positive giving over to our kids than the negatives. But you said something else I want to get back to, and I'll admit I have a little bit of a bias on this. But I'm curious your thoughts on homework in general, and how much of it, and when do parents have, I guess you could say, the mulligan, if that's the right word to use, when it comes to saying, you know what, let's just stop and that's it. It's okay. It's enough. Is there a time and a place for that?
A great question, another controversial one. In my opinion, I believe that there is a place for homework as long as it has a purpose. I don't believe in homework just for the sake of giving busy work and for the sake of overwhelming kids because I think it can backfire. I don't think it really helps. I think they become frustrated. They can't always get through it. They feel bad about themselves. But I think if homework has a purpose, it's not overwhelming, it's not too much, but it's really designed to reinforce a concept, to build a skill, whatever it is, then I do believe it. With that said, there are kids that are still going to struggle with even a minimal amount of homework. And I think if it gets to the point where it's backfiring, it's creating more frustration, it's overwhelming
Tension.
the child. Exactly. I think that's when the parent should speak to the teacher and explain what's going on at home. Maybe they can get modified homework or no homework or something that's more tailored to their specific needs.
Yeah, I love that, and I agree with everything you're saying, and I would just add as well, something that I talk about in my office a lot is parents being the advocate for their child, and their child also seeing it. But
Yeah.
at the same time, it plays a very tricky role because as parents, we have to make sure that we're there for our kid, but we're not undermining the authority of the school and what they're doing at school. Because then the second we start bad mouthing the school, the teachers, and the authority, our kids are gonna be like, hey, well, if mom or dad doesn't respect, so I'm not gonna respect. So there's a balance with it. But I think when a kid also sees that, hey, mom's on my side, and she sees that this is hard for me, and now she's gonna go speak to the teachers. And yes, there's an importance to studying for the test, but yet 25 spelling words, that's really hard. And I can't do that after spending 8, 9 hours in school. So I think there's a balance of a parent being able to go ahead and say, all right, I'm here for you. I know this is hard for you. Let's work something out. I'm going to speak to the teacher because this is something it's not capable for you right now. And that's okay. And I think a parent playing that role could be hard and difficult, but that's our role. And that's something that is, constantly changing depending on the grade and academic level of our child. That being said, I think there's also a part when it comes to school that's a level of conformity and teaching that is good in many ways, and we could have probably a whole discussion on what's going on in schools. But we're focusing on the parents right now.
Yes.
But I'm curious when it comes to the conformity that there is supposed to be in the school setting, and then you have a kid that's struggling with some reading handicap. What's the role of the parent to be helping the kid deal with the, let's call it, I'm putting this in air quotes for those that listen to it, for those that are listening, um, to be able to be an advocate, but at the same time go along and roll with what needs to be within the institution, but yet also being there for the child.
Sure. I think there's a fine line, but I think, as you sort of alluded to, I think it's really important that parents work as a team with their child's teacher and that they don't really create a battle if there doesn't need to be a battle because the teacher wants to help their child just like the parent wants to help the child. So I think having that relationship, having a form of communication is so key in terms of really tweaking and constantly changing the expectations and the assignments if need be based on the child's needs. So I think there will always be some level of conformity when it comes to school. I think in some ways we need that structure and we need
Right,
to.
it's not a bad thing,
It's not
exactly.
a bad thing, but I do think when we have neurotypical children, it's something that needs to be looked at and modified in terms of the expectations based on how they respond, not just at one point in the school year in one grade, but along the way that constantly needs to be evaluated and tweaked and changed based on how they respond and how they grow.
Okay, so based on where you come in and what your company does and how you have, I guess you could say in many ways, probably you also play a moderator when it comes to parents in schools. I'm curious, what questions should us as parents be asking the school? What should we be curious about, and how do we also look for that person outside of school that can be a benefit to us?
Sure. Well, I think first off, of course, it depends on what the child is struggling with. Do they have ADHD and need executive functioning support? Do they have dyslexia and need reading support? So I think first identifying what is the challenge and then what does my child need?
Mm,
If, for instance, there's a child that has dyslexia and really needs the Orton Gillingham method to build their reading skills, well, then the first question to ask the school is, do you have someone trained in Orton Gillingham that can work with my child during the day, whether it's pull out or push in and whatever it may be. If
mm.
they don't, and not all schools do, then it might make sense to seek an Orton Gillingham tutor outside of school. Same thing goes with executive functioning. If the teacher in the school is able to teach and reinforce strategies for planning, for organization, for time management within the school, and it's helping the child, that's great. If not, then it makes sense to look for an executive functioning coach outside of school that can still work with the school but give the child the support that they may not be able to get at school.
Okay, so I want to break that down a little bit more over there. So you talk about Gillingham, and that's something that could be someone that's trained specifically in this model that would be beneficial for dyslexia. Are there questions that we should be knowing about, or is that just like is that something that you do, and is that something that you can help my child with, or is that a part of what the treatment is for dyslexia?
Well, that is part of what the treatment is for dyslexia, but there's different ways to present the method. It can be done in a classroom setting. There are some schools that use Orton Gillingham based reading programs like Wilson or Foundations or the Sunday system. There are others that have a resource room where they can provide that kind of instruction. And then there are other schools that are not able to provide that at all. So I think those are some questions that the parent should ask the school once they know that their child
Mm.
needs that kind of approach.
So there is, I think, a very big place for pullout when it comes to a child, and I think having a small group or even one on one, if it's possible, in the given situations, that would be very, very helpful. I also feel like there's a certain part of the natural way of the way a child thinks is that I'm getting pulled out for this, I'm getting pulled out for this, I'm getting pulled out for this. That can also play on their psyche. What have you seen would be the norm, and what would be like too much when it comes to pullout within a kid within school? And if they're getting pullout in school, what would also be a balance of doing things outside of school that can be healthy and not make the child's head explode? And is there one that is better than the other?
That's a great question. And I think it depends on the severity of the challenge. I think if there's a child, call it second grade or third grade, and really can't read at all and is struggling so immensely, they need that daily pull out support. Even if they might feel bad about themselves that they're being pulled out, their need is so severe that that, in my mind, supersedes any feelings they may have of being pulled out. And by the way, if they're not pulled out and their reading challenges continue to become that much more severe, they'll have other self esteem issues. So I think it depends on the severity. If there's a mild reading issue where the child still needs support, but it's not as severe, then maybe pulling out may not necessarily be the right approach. Maybe the child might be better off getting that tutoring outside of school where perhaps their peers don't see them being pulled out. It's completely normal to have an after school tutor. Maybe they have less of those self-esteem issues. So again, I think it really depends on the severity of the challenge along with the appropriateness of the service. If there's an amazing Orton Gillingham tutor at the child's school, maybe it might be harder for the parent to find something like that after school, then that might
Mm.
make sense as well. So again, just depends on the child.
Right. Okay. So, and that's something that I think the parents should know that they are empowered to be in control of, and see how to go about it. Obviously, they have to have the means in order to have someone outside of school, which can always be an issue. Are you familiar with any, whether it's state or national grants that people can get help, or is something like this usually done through like a school system?
In New York City, some families who have a child with an IEP are able to get the New York City DOE to fund specialized tutoring outside of school if the school is not able to provide those
Mm.
services in school. It can be a little bit tricky, but there are some situations where parents can get that where they would not have to pay. And then there are other states like Arkansas and some other states where there's this emphasis on choice, on using funds that are allocated to their child that can be applied to tutoring and educational resources and so forth. So there are some, not a ton, but there are some out there that parents can access.
Okay. So, and I guess that's something that everyone should be inquiring wherever they are, and finding a Orton Gillingham type therapist that can be of benefit and trained specifically in that can go ahead and help their child. Could you share maybe like a story or an example of a situation where parents are coming to you completely flummoxed, overwhelmed,
Mm.
and a child is having so many issues that they can't even pinpoint it in a certain way, but yet through navigating through this system and through speaking to someone that's a reading specialist, they're able to get the help that they had, and you were able to see, you know what, this is the quintessential family or child situation where I wish more of this would be happening.
That sounds like my daily life. I speak to parents all the time who are completely overwhelmed. Many of them will cry on the phone to me about they're so they don't like watching their child struggle, but they also often blame themselves and feel that they should
Mm,
have done something differently. They should have
you know,
addressed it sooner, and they blame themselves. So there's a lot that goes on in that respect, and I hear it all the time. And my approach is, of course, it's not the parent's fault. No one knows when the right time is to get the right support. The fact that they're making this call is a step in the right direction. And what I would say is every child is different. I like to start by personally meeting and evaluating each child myself. If they also have any IEPs or prior evaluations, I like to read that as well, just to learn as much about the child as I can. And then from there, I identify specifically what are the areas of challenge, not just this child struggles with reading or spelling or math, but within reading, is it comprehension? Is it decoding? Is it fluency? If it's decoding, are they struggling with basic single syllable words or is it more multisyllabic words or so forth? So, really trying to pinpoint what the exact challenge is so that we can then come up with a specific plan of remediation to target those skills with the right methods. And I think when we take that approach, it really allows us to truly customize the instruction and give each child what they specifically need and not any kind of cookie cutter approach to tutoring.
right. So it's I guess, this is pretty much in like in any therapy, where there has to be a very customized way of dealing with that situation. And one of the things that really resonated with what you were just saying is that I know my wife and I can speak for myself more than my wife. I don't speak for her, but the
Or
concept of we feel guilty, I feel guilty that I can't give my child the help in a certain way, and I'm a trained therapist, and that's
sure.
something that I do, which sometimes makes it more difficult. I would argue, but I think just to the point of being able to say, all right, we need help and we need to go somewhere. And I think what you're saying is speak to that professional, and there's nothing wrong with that. And thank God that that stigma over the past decade and two for sure has gone down so much, not regarding psychotherapy and mental health in general, but I think all therapies.
Absolutely.
So I think that concept, and letting parents know that seeking help is a relief for your child, but also for you, and you've done nothing wrong, and you're helping, you're giving your child what they need. There's a reason why it's called team sports, is because it takes a team in order to win whatever it is you need to
Yes.
win at, and the home environment works the same. Mom can't do everything, even though most moms are super moms,
Or
and they also need help. So I think that's it's very important for everyone listening and watching this, that to realize, and I'm for sure speaking to myself here, that you can't do it alone, and it's important for you to just say, okay, I need help here. Is there a message along those routes that you would like parents to know when it comes to seeking that professional help when it comes to reading, that maybe they don't know about?
Sure. Well, first off, I think it's a gift. I think we're so fortunate that we have so many more resources now than we did 10,
That's a
20
good point.
plus years ago. And it used to be if a child was struggling in school, they weren't smart, they were lazy, there were all these terms that were thrown at them. And in turn, the kids felt poorly about themselves. They had no self esteem. And so the fact that there's not just awareness and more diagnosis, but we have these tools and resources that are available for children and for parents is such a gift, and to not take advantage of them is really doing a disservice to your child. So I'm a big believer in taking that positive spin, feeling fortunate that we have these tools and resources and taking advantage of them to really help our child thrive no matter what their situation is.
Yeah, I very well said, and I think something that I talk about in my office a lot. The trauma could be broken down in many different categories,
Mm.
but I believe, and dealing with a lot of adolescents and young adults, in the concept of school trauma or learning trauma, and when we are labeled and guilty as charged as being lazy, that has a big effect on their psyche. And when you have an overall belief system that there's something wrong with you, then it's gonna be much harder to learn. So all of a sudden you seek help, and then you're in a place where, like, oh wait, I could do this. Okay, I could get better at this, but I know where I'm messing up now, and it's broken down to the specific issue when it comes to the reading or comprehension. Then there's a level of, oh, okay, so if I just work on this, then I could get a little bit better. Yes, I may be in fifth, sixth grade, and I'm only reading on a level two right now, but I know that through doing this work over here in the room with Dr. Emily, whoever else it may be, there's going to be a level three really, really, really soon. And
Mm.
then from there, I could be on par, if not above, some of my classmates because I'm actually doing the work. And I think for parents beforehand to know that, okay, we have a road ahead of us, but at least now we have a road to go on.
Mhm.
Where before, sometimes we don't even know, we see this huge pole that has all these different arrows pointing all over. We don't even know what road to be going on. So
Yeah.
there's a level of knowing, okay, now we have a road. But at the same time, I also think that there's a role that parents play, like we've been talking about.
Sure.
Have Are there any like specific, I'm going to call it 10-minute hacks the parents can do at home when it comes to reading and creating, I call it, a positive association with it, in order for those neural pathways to actually turn into something that is, instead of it being negative, turning positive. We have to go it over in a way where it's going to be positive, and that could create a new pathway now. And by us doing that as parents and creating a positive affiliation with reading,
Mm.
in whatever form it may be, it could be really, really helpful. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
what role, or just say, what hack can you provide, or do you provide to parents that can sort of help bring about that, let's call it, that positive association when it comes to the world of reading, which is they're going to need no matter what field they go into in the world?
Absolutely. Well, reading clearly is so critical. And sadly, so many kids don't read as much as they used to because of devices and so forth, which is a whole other conversation.
Oh yeah.
But yes, but it's so important that even at a young age, we really try to build that love for reading. And I would say there's several different things parents can do. One is find topics that your child is interested in. It can be anything. It could be
Mm,
dinosaurs or unicorns or sports or whatever it may be, and find books on that topic. It doesn't have to just be chapter books. It could be magazines, it could be newspapers, it could be printouts from news outlets online. And read with your child to start, and then eventually encourage them to read and you read to them. But really kind of pull them into reading using topics that they're interested in. And that's just a great kind of way to start in terms of getting them to love reading. The second is create a ritual. Usually, oftentimes for little kids, it's at night before bed, or
mm,
they get to pick whatever books they want and you read with them. When they're a little bit older, I find it's a great idea to mix maybe picking one book where the child is reading once they're at a point where they're reading, and then another book that has more advanced language where the parent can read to the child so that the child is still exposed to higher level language and higher level vocabulary that might not be in the books that they're able to read. So kind of having that balance of a decodable book they can read and then another book that the parent can read. And then even creating a family ritual of a family reading time. It might be
Oh.
before dinner. There might be you can all sit around a fireplace and everybody reads their own book for a half hour, whatever it is. But nobody's on their phones, nobody's on any devices, but that's just a time devoted to reading. So I think really making it enjoyable and fun and something to look forward to is such a big part of luring kids into really enjoying reading.
Yeah, I love that, and a few things I wanna unpack, but the only one thing I would add to that is, modeling as well, and then parents, if we're gonna be telling our kids, "Hey, it's reading time," but yet we're sitting there scrolling, it's not gonna help the situation. So, I think like you were saying, being in a situation, whether it's before dinner, or before bedtime where everyone is around doing the same thing, and kids can also see parents being in a place of their love for reading, I think that goes a very, very long way. Now, when it comes to reading, I think sometimes it could be easier, depending on what the situation is, or where people are living, where people are reading ebooks. I'm curious, what role does can ebooks play in a positive way, but at the same time, what can we be cautious about when it comes to e-reading and doing stuff online with reading?
Sure. Well, I think that e-reading is clearly becoming more and more popular, and I think physical books are less popular. And a lot of it's just the physical act of having to carry a book and all of that. I don't have any issue with it per se, as long as the child is focused on the book. The problem is if it's on a phone, they might get notifications or calls might come in or emails
Mm,
may come in. And I think that can easily lead to distraction. So personally, because I'm in work mode a lot, when I'm on a device, I like reading a book that has nothing to do with my phone or tablet because it's separation for me and I can kind of get into my zone. So I think as long as someone is aware of these distractions and makes it a point, even if they set a timer to say, you know what, for 25 minutes, I'm going to read and I'm not going to take a look at any of these notifications that come in, they have to kind of make a little bit more of an effort to focus on the book. Whereas with a physical book, you may not have those distractions as readily
right.
available.
Okay, and that probably does that apply to all ages, or is it different in different ages regarding their concentration and their reading levels if they're going to be using a device or not?
Well, of course, it depends on yes, the age and their level of reading. Younger children, of course, hopefully don't have devices or
Right.
so. But I think for younger kids, certainly 7 and under, focusing on physical books, not on ebooks, is what I would recommend. And then as kids get older, it's going to really just depend on the child. I think some will be able to focus on ebooks more readily than others. Just feeling out the child and who they are comes into play there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it's our job as parents, if we're trying to be as engaged as possible, to be able to have that balance and understand what they're doing, and make if they're using a phone to have them on airplane mode, so they're not getting any notifications, and using books appropriately. Is there also a place, or maybe say differently, what place does audiobooks have in the world of comprehension and reading in general?
Sure. I think audiobooks are a great option for many students, especially if they have a learning challenges, dyslexia, they struggle to get through a book, or it's so laborious for them to read individual words, it just takes them forever. I think it's great. What I find to be extra helpful is if the student can read along while listening. That's
Uh,
the most ideal combination. But if they are not able to do that, I certainly think listening to audiobooks still gives them language and exposure to words and vocabulary that can help them, but I would say it's better to read along with the book while listening if that's possible.
For sure. Are there books that you would recommend for that, that could be beneficial to, obviously depending on the age, and reading level, but even what you were talking about before, when it comes to parents reading to their child in a way where they're hearing higher words. So like what's that balance, and how do we find that list to find those books that could be better? I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, and reading to my now 13-year-old, was Harry Potter. And seeing the different levels throughout the books, and there was more language, and he had to learn certain things regarding, oh, what's that, what's that, and that happened different ages. But I'm curious, for someone that's been in this field, what would you recommend, and how can we find those things?
Sure. So Harry Potter's great, but I don't think there's any one book or one series that's better than others in that respect. I think part of
Okay.
that the interest topic comes into play there. So again, if a child's really interested in dinosaurs, go to the bookstore or the library and find books on dinosaurs that are above their reading level, but they'll still enjoy and they'll want to learn the vocabulary and they'll want to learn about the stories because they're interested in that topic. So I think just having the book should be above their reading level so that they're exposed to higher level language and vocabulary, but also so that they're engaged in the topic and they're engaged and they want to really learn about what the parent is reading.
Right. So it's staying curious, which I guess brings about passion.
Yes.
And when we're able to do that within our kids and foster that, and today may be dinosaurs, but tomorrow might be astronauts, and then
Yes.
electric cars, and who knows what else. So
Right.
it's just fostering that, which is another added benefit to what you're talking about, which I think is so important. And these kids are dealing with so much resilience as is when they see they have you in their corner or us in their corner. It provides them with like, oh, okay, I got this, and I could go outside my comfort zone. And I think there's a very big part of dealing with reading handicap when it comes to our whatever our child is dealing with, is
Sure.
that we may look at it one way and they see it completely different because they may not see that there's a problem because they don't know that there's a problem in the first place. But
Right.
as parents, when we see certain things happening, it could be more frustrating for us sometimes than for the child.
Right.
How do we make sure as parents that we're there to support our kids and get the kids the help that they need without having them feel that, okay, there's something wrong, we got to go to the doctor, we got to go figure something out over here, and it's a bad thing that this is happening, as opposed to being something that, okay, this needs fixing, which I think is a very, very big difference in the psyche of a child.
Sure.
So what would you like parents to know when it comes to that, and using this amazing tool of reading in a very healthy, positive way?
Sure. Well, my thought on that is I like to explain to kids that we all have strengths and weaknesses. Reading might be a little harder for you, but you are an amazing artist and play up that artistic skill, by the way, as a parent. Encourage your child to take art classes, hang their art up on the wall, and really encourage their strengths and
Mm,
explain to them.
love it.
Like I tell kids, all like my kids, I tell them I might be good at reading and math, but I'm a terrible swimmer. I'm terrible. You guys are amazing swimmers. I'm terrible. And that's okay. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and we all need to work on areas that are not as strong and continue to enjoy and develop the areas where we are strong, because that's where a lot of self confidence can come from. So I really try to take that positive spin and that we're all human and we're all different and this is who we are. And that's okay. Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important piece, and I know we talk about this on this podcast all the time regarding being fallible as parents, and it's such an important skill to give over to our kids. Is that I may be super mommy, and I also need help, and I also have certain things that I'm better at than others, and that's all okay. So I love that message, and I'm glad you're saying that because I think that's one of the biggest tools that we can give our kids, and I
Mm.
think that teaches resilience and grit and puts them in a certain place to keep their head not just above water but able to swim in that water. Pardon the pun, sorry. but but putting it out there in that sense of, yeah, there are so many things that I'm good at and this I know I'm not, and that's okay. And it's very possible that reading is not something that you're going to do all the time and you're not going to love it, but the concept of knowing how to take apart a contract,
Mhm.
how to learn how to a recipe and how to do certain things, that's going to be important.
Yep.
So just learning those basic things is essential for life, and we're going to do the best with that. Okay,
Yep.
so I think there are so many things that we've been talking about that have been more individual based regarding how us parents can deal with that. But at the same time, I'm curious to hear from a professional that has been doing this for as long as you have. If you were tasked to have some sort of alterations or changes into the, let's call it, overall school system and how reading is taught,
Mm.
what are some of the things that you would do that could benefit the masses but also the individual at the same time?
Well, I believe that there needs to be a lot more targeted professional development. I think that when teachers go to college or to grad school, they learn a lot about the theory of teaching reading and writing and math and so forth, but they're not always taught specific methods like the Orton Gillingham method. If you have a child who's
Mm.
struggling with decoding, this is a method you should use. This is how you teach it. This is how you can tweak it based on how the child is doing. And I think there's not enough of that, first off, in undergraduate and graduate programs for teaching. But then once the teacher's in the classroom and is seeing this diverse group of kids with all different learning needs, they need to know which methods to use when and how. And I think having professional development and having follow through with that professional development can really help so many kids that are kind of falling through the cracks now to get the right support within the classroom.
Okay, very well said. I will say I feel like that's like I could say a little bit of like a Very healthy and nice political answer because that's an overall system change. I'm curious also to hear from you regarding like structural changes today in the classroom setting. I agree with you. I think the way the education is taught even as a therapist, I would admit I wish I knew certain things that they taught me in therapy school that could be beneficial to where I am today, and it's not something that's taught, and I had to learn it on my own.
Sure.
Which is not a bad way to learn, but still something I wish I would have learned 10 years ago,
Right.
or longer. What structural changes would you make right now, or maybe philosophies when it comes to not just reading, but how to deal with dyslexia, how to deal with the behaviors that come about from dyslexia or ADHD in the classroom that today that can really help our children thrive?
Well, I think it can be tricky within the school system because sometimes you'll have an amazing gifted teacher and they have to work within the confines of the curriculum that they're given, the state test that's coming up. And so while in an ideal world, we would identify the needs of every child and work on building the skills that are unique to them and what they need, sometimes that's a challenge within the confines of what teachers are required to follow. So I think that's a tricky one. I think it's really comes down to the teacher being able to try to do both, to really kind of cater to the needs of each child while also working within their mandated curriculum and preparing for tests and so forth.
Yeah, and hopefully this is something that will change over time. And I think this is also you're proving yet again the why teachers are probably the most underpaid professionals in the world because of that amazing gift and talent that they have, and the amount they have to juggle at the same time. It's more complex than a quarterback having people run after him and try to tackle him. So I
Right.
think there's so much that children can gain from that classroom setting, and obviously also from that individual setting. So now the teacher is tasked with okay teaching everyone and also teaching each one, which makes it so complex, and it can be very frustrating at times as a teacher, even though I've never been one, but having worked with enough schools and enough situations, I can see that being something that can be really difficult. What message or what would you like to say to teachers based on the skills that they have or maybe that they don't have and not to their fault, that would be beneficial to them?
Again, I think it's tricky for teachers, but I think that when they have the child's best interest in mind, which most teachers do, I think that if they see a child really struggling, they should let the parent know. They should recommend an evaluation. They should really help the child and help advocate as much as they can for the child to receive services that the teacher may not be able to provide within the classroom setting. I think that piece can really help a lot.
Is there a place where what would be something that you would say to a teacher dealing with burnout when it comes to the frustrations of being needing to teach the entire classroom and the individual? How can we as parents show support to that? And then from your point of view, as obviously a parent, but also as someone that is dealing with that constant go between, what would you say both to the parents, but also to the teacher?
I do think it's easy for many teachers to feel that burnout and to feel frustrated and feel that they're limited with what they're able to do. But I think when they see the real changes they can make in a child, and when they see that they can truly change this child's lives, and they hear the gratitude from families who thank
Mhm.
them for their work that they're doing with their child, for advocating for their child, and really see the value in the work, I think that that helps a teacher remember why they're in this profession. There are not
Mm.
many professions where you can truly change the lives of children in a positive way, but teachers have that power. And I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the bureaucracy and get frustrated, but at the end of the day, they're molding these children. They're creating these futures for them, and if they remember that and they're told that and reminded about that from parents, I think that can really help.
Yeah, I it's amazing how gratitude comes into so many of these conversations
Yep.
and how far that goes, and it's such an amazing fuel for teachers. And as parents, I think it's our job to also realize that, they have such a unique, special, but yet arduous task
Right.
of being able to deal with my child that has a reading disability, and yet also have a class of, I don't know, pick a number between 15 and 30, really depending on what the situation is. And then the teacher has to deal with everyone. So, there's a balance. And then when we go out of our way, we give just that gratitude. It could be a simple email or a text,
Mhm,
to a gift, which is not something that, it has to be all the time, but really depending on what level of I think participation of the parent is involved within the school and the teacher specifically. That's something that could go really, really, really far. And there is also, I think, the biggest thing is that when the kid sees that happening as well. So the kid sees that, oh wow, so this teacher is doing a little bit more for me because my parents are speaking to them, and we figured out when to do the pullout where I'm not going to miss the important things, but yet I'm also not missing recess. And then they're also making sure that I have a little bit of an easier test while we try to pick up certain things. And
mhm,
then there's an amazing appreciation. So we went to the store, made this whole gift basket, and I had involvement in that. I
mhm.
think for what the kid does, there it harbors this sense of gratitude and what my parents will do for me, and hopefully what they're going to now do for their kids. So I think that's really spot on for really for there to be something that kids can witness. So we're saying before regarding modeling, that is so important when it comes to this amazing topic, children, but yet also this very, very complex thing that we have to navigate when it comes to reading and different issues that might come about. Based on your experience, and as we're sort of wrapping up over here, because there, again, we can go in so many different directions. We just touched on technology. We just touched on two of the things when it comes to ADHD and dyslexia, and there's so many other ways that we can sort of go from here. But I, value your time, and I really appreciate all the things giving us this time over here right now.
That's it.
Are there specific things based on our conversation that you feel, okay, these are areas that parents should be notified about so that they can be curious and maybe ask questions for their child based on the way our conversation has gone today?
I think the number one message is the parent will always be their child's best advocate. And they're the ones that year after year should reach out to teachers, tell them about their child, stay on top of communicating with their teachers, but have a positive relationship with their teacher. Really try to avoid negativity, work as a team, really work together in the child's best interest. But I think constantly evaluating year to year. I think, as you said many times, I think the child needs to know that their parent will always be on their side and they'll advocate for them and they will work with their challenges and help them to find what they need in any given situation. And again, to really play up their strengths in addition to their weaknesses. It's okay if they have trouble or they struggle with a skill or set of skills. We all do. We're not perfect. Let's work together on really helping to build these skills.
Beautiful, awesome, and it goes with something I like saying it a lot because I really believe it. We want to create an environment, which is what you were saying regarding the kids seeing certain things from their parents. With the environment at home should be, I can't wait to tell my parents, as opposed to, oh, I can't wait, my parents can't find out about that.
Right.
So that's something that we want constantly, and that starts at a very, very young age, because very soon, whoever's listening to this, your kids are going to be teenagers and they're going to be adults, and the communication is going to be very, very different. And it's going to be up to you and what you do now for what that communication is going to be much later on. So it's really important to have that. And when they see you in their corner, it'll always be I can't wait to tell mom about that. And that's something that we want to do. So I really appreciate everything and this amazing guidance that you've given us. I'm curious if people want to hear or know more about you. Where and how can they contact you?
Sure. Best place is our website, which is eblcoaching.com. E like Edward, B like boy, L like Larry. And then we also have a Facebook channel under EBL Coaching, Instagram, and TikTok.
Awesome. Okay, we will have all these notes in the show notes below. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Emily and her team. We like finishing up with some rapid fire questions over here.
Okay.
Based on the way our conversation was going, I'm curious to hear from you regarding something that you're reading or listening to right now.
Oh, that's a great question. I actually just listened to Sally Shaywitz's book "Overcoming Dyslexia," which I had read many years ago. But I actually had my daughter, who's 16, in the car, who's interested in education, and we were driving together, and we listened to it together again, and it just reinforced a lot of what I knew already, but early detection, early intervention, the right treatment for dyslexia. But it was a book that I just reread or re-listened to because it's such an amazing book.
Awesome. Okay. Well, it's also really cool when you have a book that can stay with the changes of times. I think it goes really far. But thank you. I think it's the first time we've ever heard of that book over here, and maybe we'll have a chance to even post a link for it in our show notes.
Great.
I'm curious, Emily, to hear from you. If you can have brunch with anyone in history that is not alive today and not a family member, who would that be?
I'd probably have to say Diana King, who used to be my mentor. She's passed away. She was the founder of the Kildonan School, which is really the number one school for kids with dyslexia for many years. And she was like the Yoda of dyslexia. I mean, she could diagnose a child with dyslexia in 1 minute. And she was so inspirational. I did have the opportunity to spend some time with her many years ago, but would love that to have that opportunity again to really pick her brain and have brunch with her.
That's amazing. Did she have any papers or videos or books out there?
Oh, yes, she's written many books,
Okay.
many books. She was this very tough British woman who was very certain ways of how things had to be done, but it was really sort of she was an inspiration in many ways, but
Yeah.
many
Okay,
books.
Diana King. Okay, that's a good one. Well, my last question for you: if you could think of an everyday mundane superpower that you would like to have as a mom, what would that be?
I wish I could cook immaculate meals for my kids all the time. It's something that's linked to
Amazing.
the bottom of my to-do list. It doesn't really happen that often. One day.
Okay, well, hopefully you find the right cooking show that can help with that one day.
There you go. Then I have to find
Emily, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation.